Hello! So last week I talked to you about some equalizers, some EQs, and talked to you about putting them in front of overdrives, distortions, putting them behind them, putting them in the effects loop, that sort of thing. And this week I wanted to show you, dive in just a little bit deeper based on some questions I had, kind of the basic differences between parametric and graphic EQ. Now they can both do pretty much the same thing in a roundabout way if you're shaping tone, but they do it in different ways. To really show you this, I have to explain just exactly how they work. Well, not exactly how they work, but kind of how they work in a layman's sort of way. So with an EQ, you'll see that there's different bands. You'll see there's 100 and 200 and 400 and 800 and 1.6 and all that cool stuff. This is an Empress Parametric EQ. I like this one a lot, actually. There's other ones on the market. This is just the one I happen to have. So with this particular one, it'll give you the low frequency with the volume for that frequency. So let's say you put on 100 hertz. They call this low gain, which yes, it's technically gain, but for all intents and purposes, it's the volume of that frequency that you've selected. So we can cut it by 15 decibels, boost it by 15 decibels, versus just on a regular graphic equalizer, you're boosting 100 on a slider by plus or minus 15 decibels. On a parametric, you can select the Q. Now, probably the best way to explain a Q is on a graphic, you're not just taking 100 hertz. You might be taking 100 hertz and some 90 hertz and maybe some 110 hertz, or just given some random numbers. You're taking a selection of frequencies kind of centered on 100. With the parametric, you can say, okay, I want a wider range. So I actually want to affect 70 hertz to 150 hertz. Or I can make it go very narrow. So now it's just 100 hertz and 110 hertz or somewhere in that area. So it allows you some different sounds, really. It's very similar. So let's say I wanted to boost 800 hertz on the graphic equalizer. I only have a slider to do it with. With the parametric EQ, I set it on about 800 hertz. I can select a small Q, I can select a little bit bigger Q, and a much wider Q. So much wider range around that 800 hertz, and then I can boost or cut with the gain control for the mids. Versus on the equalizer, if I wanted to do the same thing, I'd have to boost 800, maybe a little bit of 400, maybe a little bit of 1.6. And it's still not going to be the same, but that would be the effect of having a very wide Q using a graphic equalizer to kind of give you an idea of what that would look like on the spectrum. That doesn't really tell you anything. Now we got to play through it. I'm running through a deluxe reverb, and that's my basic tone. I have just a standard Boss Blues driver here that I'm going to run some gain through. Some people have said that this pedal actually is a little ice picky on the high end. I think it really depends on what amp you're using. I'm on the vibrato channel of the deluxe reverb reissue, so it's a little brighter than the normal channel. But we can dial all that ice pickiness out if we want to. With just no EQ, just the blues driver. Let me set up the EQ so I can, I'm just going to boost the mids a little bit, I'm going to cut the bass a little bit, I'm going to cut the treble just a little bit. So that's the basic upside down smiley face or the frowny face sort of EQ. It's going to give you more of a mid boost. On the Empress or the parametric EQ, I would set it so the Q is wide. I would set it for about 800 hertz, and then I'm going to just bump up this mid control just a little bit, the mid gain control, to kind of approximate the same sort of sound. So there's the blues driver with the Boss graphic EQ. With the Empress. And again with it off. Okay, so with the parametric EQ, let me just sort of sweep through some frequencies. I'll start with the lows, and I'll run the gain up so you can kind of hear the difference between the frequencies. And that's with it boosted. So cutting it. So, and that's, like I said, that's just around the low frequencies. So we can do the same exact thing with the mids. And if we're cutting on those mids, and then the same thing with the highs. Now the highs go, on this one they go all the way up to 20K, which is pretty high for a guitar amp. You're not gonna notice a whole lot. I'll go ahead and run it all the way up and boost it and turn the EQ on and off. This is with it on. So as you can see, it really adds some fizziness to it. Not a whole lot of EQ change, I wouldn't really call it. I would just say that the upper high harmonics are getting fizzy. So that might be something to kind of dial out a little bit. If it's too fizzy, I probably would back it off a little bit. Frequency wise, maybe run it 10K or so. So that kind of gives you an overall idea of the difference between a parametric and a graphic equalizer. Both of them are extremely useful. In fact, this Empress actually has an input pad on it. Let's say you're using an effects loop in an amp where it's fairly hot and it's distorting your boss EQ. You can take some of those, take the hotness out of it, I guess you could call it. So you can take some of that signal away so it doesn't distort your EQ pedal and use it in the loop. Now, not all loops are going to do that, but some amps with some loops do that. And then also with this one, it has a boost. So if you need to boost the volume back up, you can kick on the boost and boost that volume back up into your amp. So that's the basic difference between a parametric and a graphic EQ. I hope this helped you. And if you have any questions or comments, make sure you comment below, and we'll see you next week.